on in my life, probably in my early to mid-20s, I was living like a lot of people do, fairly unconsciously, but not aware of my unconsciousness, just kind of going through life and often feeling as though life was happening to me, that I was a victim to what was going on in my life, or that that the places in my life where I was unhappy, whether it was in a relationship or where I was living or in my job, had nothing to do with, had less to do with what I was doing and more to do with just sort of the circumstances of life. And I started to be introduced to looking at the world in a different way. For example, through Louise's book, You Can Heal Your Life, which was very influential to me early on. What a lot of people don't know, I actually have as a side story, a funny little story about Louise that nobody really knows. And that is that when I was probably 24 or 25 years old, I volunteered for an organization called Interface in Cambridge, Mass. That was considered the East Coast Esalen. You may remember that. And it's a place where people like Deepak Chopra would come, and Bernie Siegel, got his sort of start there. And I was volunteering there, and I was volunteering because I was really interested in this whole self-help field, and recovery was a big thing at the time. And Louise Hay was coming to speak for Interface. She was coming to a hall in downtown Boston, and I had read You Can Heal Your Life. And I was really taken by two things. Number one, the fact that she was teaching from her own experience, and she was so honest about her life in the book. I was really engaged by that. But also the practical nature of the book, that you could actually do something with it. You could look up and see, oh, I have this physical ailment, and therefore this might be going on. And I appreciated the the fact that it was interactive. And so I was really taken by her work, and so I asked if I could be the volunteer that would drive to the airport to pick her up and to take her back to the hall. Now, nobody knows this. It's really ironic, actually. Here I am today, a Hay House author and a speaker, and Louise doesn't even know this. She probably doesn't even remember, but I remember driving to the airport. It was in the dead of winter, and it was freezing. And so this is one of the first people who has really touched my life in a significant way and has begun the opening to the belief that, wow, maybe there's something more to life than meets the eye. Like maybe there's something that I'm doing in my life that's creating what's happening, and not just the fact that life is happening to me. So I drive to the airport. It's freezing cold. I get there, and of course her flight is delayed. And it's delayed for about 3 hours. And I sit in the airport, as this like young, excited fan, who just can't wait to meet her. And I'm, every time they say, the flight will be in 20 minutes, I'm like, okay, and I'm fixing myself and hoping that I look really smart, and hoping that I don't look too eager, although I'm sure I just look like a bumbling idiot just waiting like this little girl. And I remember the flight finally came. It was probably at 1 o'clock in the morning, and she had long hair, and she came down the jetway, she was walking down the jetway, and I was watching her, and she came out like a queen. And I sat there speechless, like, I can't believe this is really Louise Hay, and I'm going to meet her. And she's looking around, and I'm just so taken by her that I forget that I'm supposed to stand up and go, hi, I'm your volunteer. And eventually I did that, and she was very gracious and got in the car and drove her back, and then went to pick her up at the hotel the next night to take her to the venue where she was going to speak. And I just remember she just had such a presence about her way back then that she still has today. And that night when I heard her speak, that, along with some other events that occurred during that time, was the awakening when I thought, wow, there's something about the way I think that may be influencing what's happening in my life. And so somebody had said to me, and I don't remember who it was some teacher, had talked about how, there is this power greater than us at work in the world. And, one of the ways you can test it is, one of the ways you can test how our thinking partners with this greater power, and in that partnership, we can manifest things in our life. And one of the ways you can test it is very simple. Just take a little yellow sticky note and write down 2 or 3 things that you'd really like to have in your life. And then keep that sticky note in view so that you see it all the time. You don't focus on it too hard, but you just keep it in your consciousness. And so I thought, yeah, this is a bunch of baloney, but I'll give it a try. I'm willing to try anything. So I take the little yellow sticky note and I write. I specifically write out, because they said you have to be very specific about what you want, don't be general. So I write exactly the kind of computer that I wanted. I was a young writer, you know, and wanted, back then it was a big deal to get a computer with a word processor on, you know, a word processor on it. And so I specifically wrote the kind of computer and the kind of software and the kind of word processor that I wanted. And then I put down that I wanted to travel. And this person had said, by the way, if there's certain things you want, make sure you put the word free in front of them, like make it fun. So I wrote free travel. And there was a third thing, I don't remember what it was, but this was in November. About a month later, for Christmas, my boss at the time, I was working for an entrepreneur as an administrative assistant, my boss gave me the exact computer that I had written down on the yellow sticky note as a Christmas gift. And I remember when I opened the box and I saw what it was, and I saw, it happened to be something I had worked on, a system I had worked on for him, and I saw what he had given me, I thought, oh my God, what if this actually works? And then I went, nah, it can't possibly, it's just a coincidence. And I said, the heck with it, and, you know, threw it away. But then 2 weeks later, a dear friend of mine who worked for a large Fortune 50 company called me and said, hey, guess what? I won the top salesperson award in my company, and it's a free trip to Boca Raton to stay in the presidential suite of the Boca Raton Resort Hotel. Now, I didn't even know where Boca Raton was. But she said, you know, I can bring a guest with me. You want to come with me? It won't cost anything, and we'll get to stay in the presidential suite. And that's when I went, okay, give me that little sticky note again. Maybe there's something to this, you know. And sure enough, and that was a very powerful experience for me. You know, I've since grown up a lot since then, and I don't see the universe as Santa Claus, where you just sort of write things down and they happen. There's a lot more to it than that. However, it was my commitment to be awake, to become more conscious, and my willingness to actually think about what I wanted. You know, that experience gave me a visceral sense of what it was like to be the master of my own destiny instead of feeling like the victim. Or instead of feeling like I was at the effect of the world, maybe I had something to do with this as well. And so, you know, many, many years later, I'm 20, 25 years older, and I realized that the gift of that little sticky note was the recognition, the spark of recognition that I have a lot more to do with what happens in my life and in the lives of the people around me than I ever realized. And therefore, I need to be very responsible about that power, and it's my duty to use it. Some of the challenges I see with the purple, some of the challenges I see with purple.
I have lots of purple.
Purple really bothers me, okay? There's something about purple. Don't get me started, because I'll do a whole Saturday Night Live riff. Thank you. Okay, I get it. Okay. That was great. Some of the challenges that people are faced with are the same kinds of things, same challenges I've been faced with. Impatience, a lack of clarity. So let's start there with a lack of clarity. Most of us think in generalities. I hate my job, I want a new job. Okay, that's great. That's a great place to start, but what are you looking for? Like getting specific, knowing what you want. A lot of people know what they don't want, but they don't necessarily know what they want. So really taking the time to clarify what it is you want, like really investing the time in that. It's amazing to me. We're so busy that we don't really put a lot of time and energy into really sitting down and saying, what's working in my life? What isn't? What do I want to change? And then specifically looking at what I want to change. So clarity, and then another obstacle is just not knowing what to do. Like a lot of times, we're missing information about what the next step might be in terms of the action equation of affirmations plus actions equals miracles, right? A lot of times we're missing information about what to do, how to take action, but we call it something else, like I must be afraid, that's why I'm stuck, or I'm sabotaging my success, that's a big one. That's why, my intentions aren't happening for me, or that's why I'm stuck. I have a fear of success. That's why I'm stuck. When really, a lot of times, it's quite simple. People just don't know what to do next. That's where the profession of coaching has been so helpful, because if you say to me, you want to write a book, believe me, you're going to talk to me about, how you're afraid you have nothing important to say, or it's all been said before, and you think that's what's keeping you stuck, but the truth is you don't know that, oh, I have to write a book proposal. Great, what does that look like? Oh, you know what, there's a book out there called How to Write the Perfect Book Proposal. And if you read it, it will show you what it looks like, and then you can actually do it. What I've found that's so wonderful and resilient and encouraging and inspiring about humanity is we will take actions when someone just helps us to know what it is we need to do. And another important obstacle, I think, is isolation. We're lonely, and we need each other. You know, we came to this planet together for a reason. And I think it's a lack of support and an inability to ask for help that often keeps us stuck. So you may have an intention, I want to write a book. You finally get the information about what it is you need to do, but then you get scared along the way, because we get scared. And who's there to hold your hand or to say, you know what, it's okay. You know, yes, you can do this. Just like, let's break it down into an even smaller step so that you stay moving in the right direction instead of allowing yourself to be stuck. And, you know, by the way, don't go to the hardware store for milk. Make sure you turn to people for support who are really going to support you. Because a lot of us, when we start doing those things to honor our soul or to express our creativity, those are really vulnerable acts. You know, the things that we intend or that we affirm for our lives are those things that are deeply important to our soul, and so they're vulnerable. And too often we turn to people who just squash them, you know, or who tell you why it isn't going to work, or why that's a crazy affirmation, or that's a crazy intention. That's called going to the hardware store for milk. You want to go to the people who are really going to hold your hand on the journey and say, hey, I'm there, right there with you. So those are some of the obstacles. So in my life, I would say I can't say the first half of my life because who knows where I am in it, but probably the first 30 or so years of my life, most of my spiritual growth was around relationships. I actually find that to be true for a lot of people, that it's our relationships, particularly our romantic or intimate relationships, where we get challenged the most early on. And so a lot of I would often choose men. I would often fall in love with a man's potential and then have a relationship with the dream of that relationship. So I would literally be in relationship with the dream of what it could be instead of the reality of what it was. And that's like probably the most prevalent theme throughout all of my early relationships. And the gift of them, the gift of every single person I was ever involved with, and I see all of them as spiritual change agents today, is that they really forced me to grow. You know, there were the painful relationships with the men who weren't emotionally available, and I thought for sure, you know, they couldn't feel their feelings, and they couldn't be there for me emotionally until, you know, a therapist said to me, did it ever occur to you that maybe you can't feel your feelings and you can't be there emotionally for people? And that was a whole new concept for me. And, you know, and so that man who, quote, couldn't feel his feelings became a catalyst for me looking at my own inability to do that. And so a lot of my relationships were unbalanced as well. A lot of times I would choose partners who weren't ready for their own commitment to consciousness like I was, and I was trying to get them on board, which was a really arrogant and inappropriate thing to do, but I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was being helpful, and, you know, controlling looked like helpful and loving. And so I reached a point in my life, I mean, the truth was I was really afraid of being alone. And so I would rather be in a relationship that wasn't fulfilling than be alone. You know, like a lot of women, I grew up, you know, from generations of women where it wasn't okay to be alone. And so when I finally had enough therapy under my belt and enough healing under my belt where I said, you know what, something tells me I better be alone for a while if I'm going to find a good relationship, and I finally got my own apartment and moved in and dealt with all of the discomfort of that in the beginning, and then over time began to fall in love with myself and my own place. And then I started to think about meeting a partner, and I started to, you know, face the reality that I was lonely in a different way and that I wanted someone to share my life with. You know, by that point, so this is around 33 or 34, I had a clear history of having intentions, having affirmations, taking actions, and watching miracles unfold in my life. I mean, I have a million examples of how that happened in very powerful ways. And I write a lot about those experiences. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to take this and I'm going to craft myself a great partner. And I spent 7 days writing about exactly the kind of man I'd like to meet, his physical qualities, intellectual, where he was at financially in his life, spiritually, all the way down to I hope he loves dogs, and, you know, I hope he has dark hair and dark eyes, because I'm so attracted to men with dark hair and dark eyes. My prayer is always, you know, to God, please allow this or something greater to occur. You know, please, if this isn't in my highest and best interest, that's okay. Don't let it happen then. but please may this or something greater occur that supports my highest and best interests. So every day I worked on this list, and then at the end of 7 days I gave it to a close friend and I said, here, have I missed anything? Because you're always going to miss something. And I did, and she helped me to, really tighten up the list. And then I created a treasure map, something I've taught for years, and I took a big poster board and I started to take pictures of men that I thought were attractive out of magazines that kind of fit that profile, and men with dogs, and men engaged in the kinds of things that I like to do, and just this board, sort of like a storyboard of what my life would look like if I were in love with my perfect mate. One night I was sitting in my apartment with a girlfriend of mine who was an actress, and she was going through a magazine that had personal ads in it. And she was reading the different personal ads with different accents as part of her acting training. So she gave it to me and she said, here, you try with an Italian accent. And I suck at that. So I said, I'd open up the magazine and I start to read this one ad and I say to her, oh my God, this is an amazing ad. She said, read it to me. And I read it to her and I said, wow, there was something about it that just really hit me. And she said, call it. I said, absolutely not. I'm not calling a personal ad. Are you kidding me? She said, I dare you to call it. I said, no way, I'm not doing it. So I put the magazine down. Every day for 4 days, I picked up that magazine in my apartment and I read that ad. And on the 5th day, I remembered affirmations plus action creates miracles. And I remember where I was standing. I remember the exact phone I used. I picked up the phone and I dialed the box number on the ad. And before I said anything into the recording, I said out loud, this is my prayer to the universe. I'm ready to meet somebody important in my life. I don't know whether it's this person or not, but this phone call is my willingness to take action to make that happen. 2 days later, Michael called. I love the name Michael, by the way, as well. And he called to respond to the ad. And we spoke by phone. I was so nervous. Talked by phone. He sent me his photo. I sent him mine. On the day that we were supposed to meet for dinner, I went to the post office and his photo never arrived. And I thought to myself, God, should I cancel the date and wait for the photo? And I said, nah, just go. And I walked to I went to the restaurant where I was to meet him, and he walked through the door, and I'll never forget, he walked through the door, and I thought, please, God, let that be him. And he walked up to me, and he went, Cheryl, and here I was, this professional speaker, right, this like all-together woman, and I went, Michael? Like a little girl. And that night was the first time in my life where I couldn't catch my breath through the whole dinner. As a matter of fact, he started making fun of me. And as I got to know him, I realized he met just about everything on my list except cooking. I forgot to put a man that cooks on my list, which I really want to go on record as saying is an important thing if you don't cook, but no. But honest to God, so that was 13 years ago. And I knew this was the man I was going to marry. It was the best day of my life to marry him. It could make me cry just thinking about it. And that was a powerful example of having a strong affirmation, really being clear about what it is you want, being willing to take the actions to make it happen. And, by the way, really investing in how I needed to grow in order to match that list. And I got, that's what a soulmate really is. And that's, when I look at all of the things that have occurred in my life as a result of my intentions, that's the best one. It's amazing to me how when we create intentions and affirmations from that pure soul place, what we're really calling into our lives are the very things that are meant to assist us on our spiritual journey. I mean, my life is so far different than I could have ever imagined, and I didn't know, like sometimes we don't know the power of our intentions and our affirmations. And that's why it's so important to listen to that little voice inside. Because Emmett Fox said it years ago, the great spiritual teacher from the early 1900s, Emmett Fox said, usually our deepest desires are those things that we're the most embarrassed to admit out loud. We don't want to say them out loud, but those are usually the desires of the soul. And when we state them and when we put them in writing and when we start to act on them, there is this divine power that rallies behind us to support our efforts. I mean, I met Michael in 2 weeks. That's pretty quick manifestation, wouldn't you say? But there were a lot of years before that where the lag time was much longer. And you know what? It was the right time. And a lot of times we intend to bring things into our lives into an already too full life. And so sometimes what we need to do is actually make the space as that's actually part of the action plan, is making the space to allow in whatever it is we intend, because too many of us just don't have the space in our lives for that. And that was, something I really did have to create the space. And I also had to look at how deathly afraid I was. I saw marriage as a cage on a very deep level. I saw it as a cage. And little did I know I was living in a cage. And when I met this man, he had the key that opened it. Who would have thought? I would have never thought. The affirmations is just the starting point. That's like going, okay, here's where the goal is. What really gives those affirmations power is the emotion we put behind it. So what's interesting is you start out the journey going, okay, let me start here. Step 1 is what's the affirmation. Step 2 is, how can I generate the emotional power behind that affirmation? And a lot of that comes from taking actions to support that affirmation. That's how you begin to step into that state. And then as you step into that state and you take actions and you put the emotional power behind those affirmations, they begin to manifest themselves in your life. Now you come full circle, and the opposite then becomes true or really it's just more full circle in that it's more about living in that powerful emotional state and the belief that all that I need is right here in this moment. Love truly is the most powerful force in the world. Abundance is our birthright and available to each and every one of us if it's part of our spiritual plan. And so it's living in that emotional and energetic state that is the sort of end. I don't know, it's probably not the end game. We'll see what happens next, right? But it's that way of being that you get to now live in as a result of the work you did early on, kind of installing those affirmations in your brain. I think of my brain as a computer. I've installed some great software. It plays in the background. I don't even know what it is anymore. I don't even hear the words, but I live in the state of those words as much as I possibly can, and I feel when I'm not living in that state.
I grew up in a family in which we were interested in organic food and the mind-body connection, actually. My father was a dentist and holistically oriented, and he would say that you can tell the state of somebody's health by looking in their mouth, and that also the mouth is the center of the personality, and that's why no one likes you mucking around in there, and why dentists have the second highest suicide rate, second to psychiatrists, in that the mouth is perhaps less demoralizing than looking into their mind. So I grew up with a different take. My aunt and uncle were both medical doctors, straight medical doctors, and they made fun of my father's ideas, but he was always happier. And our family did not believe too much in conventional medicine, so my earliest memories are of having my brother, Billy, being signed out of the hospital against medical advice. He wouldn't eat. And a nurse came up to my mother and said, "Get him out of here. The doctors don't know what's going on. He'll die if he stays here." And I'd had a sister who died in a hospital early on, and she didn't eat either, and we never knew what was wrong with her. So imagine you're a kid, I'm 8 at this time, and my little brother is home, and he has a tube down his throat, and my parents are feeding him by tube every hour on the hour. And he's throwing it back up. And at the age of a year, he was alive. At the age of a year, he weighed 10 pounds. And my parents tried to find a doctor who knew what was going on. And they finally found a woman doctor, Dr. Crump, at Women's Medical Center in Philadelphia, who did pediatric endoscopy, put a tube down and said his esophagus is so eroded from this tube that if you continue to tube feed him that way, his esophagus will erode through, there'll be a big hole in it, and he will die. Let's take out the tube and see what happens. And so she had enough faith in the healing power of the human body that she took out the tube, and they gave him liquids through what was called chlysis, where you put a big bolus of fluid with a big needle into the thigh. And after a couple days, he started to eat. And we still don't know why. And I remember going to the airport, and my mother was holding him on her lap, and he was eating a roll that the stewardess had given him, and we all started to cry. And when I went to medical school, which I wasn't going to do, I never wanted to be a doctor. I thought my aunt and uncle's life looked not fun. They had to leave every Thanksgiving and every Christmas. But I remember thinking, when I go to medical school, I want to find out why doctors don't talk to patients. I want to find out why the fullness of the mystery is not addressed. And I never intended to practice medicine. But I always believed from my childhood experiences that there was more going on than what we were taught. Now, and like most medical students, I became puffed up. I became very proud of what we could do with drugs and surgery. But when I saw the first time I saw a baby born, I started to cry. I just wept with a combination, really, of joy and also sorrow. And the nurse was yelling at the medical student, and she, because he had let go of the cord, and they're like a mini fire hose, and it was going all over the wall. And I'm thinking, this is holy. This is a holy place. This is not a place where you yell at anybody. And it occurred to me, nobody should be in that room during a birth who didn't know this was holy. And it was that experience that caused me to become an obstetrician gynecologist. And being around women giving birth was like being like breathing. It was that easy. But I also saw that fear and anger and all of this completely messed up the process of birth. But I didn't know how to get those ideas across to the patient, especially if her mother had already told her, now you'll see how I suffered with you. And I did all kinds of work trying to prove to myself that the mind-body connection was real. And how did we get into the mind so that the body would change? I myself had terrible migraine headaches from the age of 12 to the age of 21, once a month, twice a month, whatever. I'd been worked up in a Boston hospital, a week there with all kinds of testing. They never knew what it was. At the age of 19, I had to do this English paper, a critique of the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn, or Ode to a Grecian Urn by Keats, and I didn't know what the professor wanted. And like most migrainous personalities, I needed to know what it was they wanted of me, and I couldn't figure it out. And it was in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was in November. And when I came out of the library not knowing how to get an A in the course, I temporarily thought, maybe I should just throw myself in front of a car. It would be easier than this. And then I thought, no, you'll break your leg, and then you're going to have to do the poem, and then you're going to have to lug around a cast at the same time. The idea that I had a choice never occurred to me because I was operating on a belief system that was obsolete. I go back to my dorm, I call my parents, and I say, I hate it here, this isn't working for me. And my father says, quit. So quit. You can come home. And I changed my mind. And in that moment, I changed the migraine headaches. I maybe had 3 or 4 the rest of my whole life because I changed this pattern, this 6th emotional center, perception, thought, morality, which is what headaches are. And my perception was, you must do this, and I've really been driven my whole life to get it right. And get it right, though, in the way that the culture, and in my case, the practice of medicine says is right. But here's the problem. Most of what I was taught in medicine about what causes disease is not the truth. I cured my migraine headaches, not with Imitrex, not with Advil. I cured them with a change of perception, you see. And the only time that I got them from then on is when I was doing something migrainous, like trying to clean up my entire house in half of a day, because I had the time. Now, if I could just organize the clutter from 25 years, and I can get in this state of being driven, where I'm completely disconnected from my mind and my body, and I'm just going for it. It's a beautiful way to get through a surgical subspecialty. Keep your head down, keep your nose to the grindstone. But you know what happens when you do that? You get cortisol levels that are too high, adrenaline levels that are too high. These are the stress hormones. They constrict blood vessels in every place in the body. And headaches are just the beginning. So the belief system behind the migraines, which I had for as long as I could remember, was you must get straight A's in school. It was this internal pressure. You must perform to a certain level. And I was the valedictorian. And in my class of Ellicottville Central High, everyone who'd ever gone to college that I knew about had gotten pregnant and dropped out. So I had this idea that when I went to college, I was going to be washed out quickly. So I studied like, this was in the 60s and 70s. This was, everybody's on birth control, having sex with everything not nailed down, and they're all smoking dope. And I am here to study what is wrong with the rest of you people. I didn't understand what the Kent State thing was all about. What are you doing? Okay, it's spring in Cleveland. You're throwing rocks at the horses on Euclid Avenue of the policemen. But I have a biology exam here. So there was this tremendous drive to achieve in a certain way, which was academically in a certain way. When I temporarily decided it would be easier to throw myself in front of a car and then quickly realize, it's like mental health came on board quickly because I grew up as a pretty optimistic person. When my father said, "So quit," it was that I had the patriarchal authority figure in my family saying, "You have another choice. You can quit. Come home. Live here." And in that moment, I could stay because I knew I could leave. Because I instantly, in that moment, thought, okay, what would I do in my hometown? What, would I marry my high school boyfriend? What would I do? Probably it would be better if I stayed here and finished this degree. But maybe I could finish it in a way that was a little lighter and more free. And what is the worst thing that could happen? You might get a B instead of an A. And what is the worst thing that could happen there? Probably nothing. And so I actually began to enjoy aspects of my life and live more in the moment. And then had the experience, actually, of getting a C in organic chemistry and being thrilled to pass. I had a big fibroid tumor in my late 40s, and I was diagnosed on pelvic exam right after I finished my first book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. So the first place I went in my head was, oh, I caught one. I've been around fibroids so long that I caught one. When you're under stress, you go right back to your original programming, which is the germ theory of disease, right? So I must have caught one, like these things are contagious. And, but the law of attraction is contagious. And I thought it was something about the book, because I knew fibroids were creativity that hasn't been birthed yet. And then it got bigger, and it got bigger, and it got bigger, until finally one Thanksgiving, I had that experience of, and I tried, acupuncture twice a week. I was macrobiotic. I did everything known to humanity. And my patients had often been able to dematerialize fibroids, and I always knew it was possible. I couldn't. And I finally, one Thanksgiving, said, I'm so sick of dressing around this thing. I look pregnant. I'm just getting it out of here. That's what surgery's for. Let's go do it. And I knew enough when I went under anesthesia to have the anesthesiologist repeat some statements so that I would reprogram and go into sort of deep hypnosis. And the one statement was, and when you awaken, the pattern that created this will have left your life. And I was a single woman 2 years later. Fibroids are creativity that hasn't been birthed yet. And they are also caused by shoving your creative energy, your second chakra, sex, power, money, drive into some kind of avenue. Because, ovaries are female balls, and we have drives toward what we want. In my case, I wanted partnership in my relationship. And my relationship was not where I was going to find partnership. But what happens if you don't know better and you don't have the insight, if it's not working, you do it harder. And so I kept trying everything I knew to do to fix the marriage, which is completely dumb. I mean, you have to work on fixing you or transforming you. But the fibroid had gotten to this certain point, and then I had the surgery, and as I did my recovery, I said, when I do this recovery, I want this to be the postpartum rest that I have never given myself. And I rested for a whole month. And I said, the next thing that comes out of my womb, I am going to have a postpartum rest. And so I began to change patterns in my relationship because I started to take care of my deepest self, starting right with my womb, the center, really, of a woman's body. And that began to change the dynamic of the relationship, and it really had nowhere to go. Though you don't know that until retrospectively. I mean, it's like I really, even in the divorce proceedings, was certain that I could do something to make it work. So we have these mental patterns, and my pattern certainly is like, show up and get her done. Okay, and it works good, but it doesn't work in a relationship or in some place where you have to let the universe bring in what's missing. That's more yin. I was very good at yang. I'm a really good surgical type brain, but this was to balance and allow something to come to you. People do affirmations, and they do their journals, and they wear purple and all that. But boy, when it comes to the vagina, the vulva, the breasts, the uterus, that all goes out the window. Because these organs, we're taught these are lemons. These organs were created because Eve ate the apple and screwed up. And these are going to get you. And so the whole conversation around women's health is, what can go wrong? Let's screen for what can go wrong. And if we don't find it this year, come back next year. We will. And so in my own body, in my own life, in my own profession, it's been, how do we turn the conversation around? And it begins with changing the way you think about this female body. The biggest miracle of my life over the past 7 years is that I have discovered that it is possible after menopause to be sexy, to be attractive, to be a woman, to realize the game isn't over. In fact, the game is just beginning. What a miracle. It's been my experience that men are desperate to support and appreciate women. And they can't do it until a woman knows how to support and appreciate herself. And then she can teach a man how to support her. We have right now in history this very strange situation in which when a woman doesn't know how to support herself, when she doesn't even know what turns her on, she turns to the man and says, do it for me. And if he can't figure out what to give her for Valentine's Day or her birthday or their anniversary, if she doesn't give him any clues, he's a loser. He loses. And if I were a guy, I would be terrified to be in relationship with a woman who doesn't know what she desires or what turns her on, because you're left with a load that is too heavy. So the first thing I would say for a guy is, don't get in a relationship with that kind of woman, okay? But in labor, it's fabulously obvious. Your job is to love your woman. That's all. Your job is to love her. And remember, the energy that gets the baby in is the energy that gets the baby out. And that's Ina May Gaskin, who wrote Spiritual Midwifery. And so encourage the women in your life to care for themselves at the deepest level. And if they turn on you premenstrually because they're in what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body, you know, we all have to do our part to clean up our part of the pain body, and the pain body of all women comes up premenstrually. What you say is, honey, take a bath, do whatever you need. I'll see you later. What I want all women to know is that within their biology, they have the code for enhancing all of life. The egg can take a sperm and heal the genetics of a defective sperm. The egg contains the nourishment that the new fetus needs to get to the stage before it gets to the placenta and implants. Every time a woman is in her power, she upgrades everyone and everything around her. This is not a zero-sum model. When a woman is doing better and she's healthier and happier, she raises me up. Whenever a woman gets healthy and happier, she heals the earth. The woman's body is a reflection of the earth, and everything we do to take care of ourselves, to feel pleasure, to be orgasmically joyous, heals the entire planet. Everyone in South Boston would call in the middle of the night for sex advice because, you know, this was St. Margaret's Hospital, Catholic, and, you know, they didn't know anything. And so this woman calls in the middle of the night once. She says to the nurse, "Is it true when you use that foam it burns your husband's penis?" It's 3 a.m. The nurse goes, "I hope so." There's this interesting thing that happens when somebody gets it, really downloads a more positive way of thinking. They get hormonal balancing, for one thing. We know that when somebody is thinking with their heart, like they see a puppy or a sleeping baby, and they go, oh, your DHEA levels rise, which begins to balance your hormones, but something else really more important happens, and that is the beat-to-beat variability of the heart normalizes. And you get into this wave pattern that you can see on a heart rate monitor that actually begins to balance the entire body, given that the heart is a huge electromagnet that in fact trains the rest of the body. So this thought or this state of deep relaxation or whatever it is that enlightens you actually results in a decrease in stress hormones, a normalization of blood sugar, decreasing of blood pressure, and a relaxation of all smooth muscles. It is, in fact, a balance of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is the brake, and sympathetic is the gas. And most people in this culture have the gas on all the time with an occasional brake. So you're going around like this. You need to have, when both are in balance, which happens when you breathe through your nose while exercising, you actually, it's like banking your wood stove with just the right amount of wood and air. You can work so much more efficiently and so much longer because you've got this beautiful yin-yang balance of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So any thought of, oh, man, I gotta get straight A's here, or something's gonna happen, I don't know what. I mean, in my own case, I don't know what's gonna happen. You will fail, this will be terrible. But then when you go, so I could quit. So I remember my sister at the time went to 4 different colleges. I remember thinking, what is wrong with you? I mean, you know, this will be on your record. And now I realize years later, no one has looked at my record for years. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. And those are the thoughts that just balance it all out. When you get it, that you have so much more control over your life than you thought you did, or control over your experience of your life, if not the events of your life, there is this sense that is so playful and so joyous And you can just start to giggle when you realize you've made it all up, you're creating it all, and there's a sense of joyous relief. You feel like a kid, but you've got all the ego strength of an adult. And it's but just before you get there, there's usually this time of pain-filled joy or joy-filled pain, where you might have to break down with some deep sobs. I had that happen in a workshop with Ann Wilson Schaaf, and we were doing an intervention on one of my partners who we suspected was an alcoholic, and we all went to get over, to cure our codependence. We knew it was killing us. We started a women's clinic, right? We were blaming the guys. They weren't doing it right. We're going to do it right. Run by women, for women. Here we are 2 years out. We're more exhausted than we ever were when the guys were running it, and we weren't making any money. So we thought, okay, we're all codependent, so we better get ourselves to treatment. So we go away to a 10-day treatment, and by then we suspect someone's been drinking too much, and I'm wanting to do the intervention. Come on, let's get to the intervention phase. And it's day 8 of this workshop, and people are down on the mats, and they're crying, and they're weeping, and I'm thinking, you poor slobs, you've got so much pain. The rest of us have it together. You don't, of course. And it was like being in labor and delivery. Then the time comes for the intervention, and Ann Schaaf, and I start to, the intervention, you tell the person how much you love them. I start to tell my colleague how much it meant to me when she parked my car when I was in labor with my second daughter. To have a doctor support you was like almost too much, and I started to cry. And Ann said, why don't you lie down and see what comes up? I lie down to see what comes up, and I quickly push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down, which I was really good at. And I sat up and I said, no, I'm okay. I can handle it. And she says to me, you are so tired. And the dam burst. And I lay down and I sobbed for hours. And in that moment, I went through not only my own tears, but I went deep into a place called the pain of all women. All the women who never had anyone with them in labor. All the babies that died. All of the pain of women. And I knew where my work came from. And I knew what I came here to do, which was to transform that pain into joy.
My parents are what I consider to be metaphysicians. They attended religious science and unity churches and were big advocates of using affirmations, visualization, and prayer to create their reality. And one of my most memorable experiences was when our family automobile went kerplunk. I mean, it just died. It was an Opel station wagon, and my dad decided he wanted to get a Ford Pinto. Now, don't ask me why. You can get whatever thing you want using your thoughts. But for some reason, he had his heart set on buying a Ford Pinto. So he went to the local toy store and got a little Hot Wheels die-cast model of a Ford Pinto, and he painted it brown because he wanted a brown Pinto. That's his favorite color. Again, don't ask me why. And he put the little Hot Wheels model Ford Pinto on our family television set, dragged my little brother and I out of our bedrooms, and the 4 of us sat there every day, and we looked at that little Pinto, and he had us visualize it being real, sitting outside in our driveway. And he had us not only visualize it, but using our entire body. He had us picture what it would feel like to sit in the car, to smell the new car smell, to hear that roar of the 4-cylinder Pinto engine. And he had us just imagine every day that we owned this car. We had no idea how we were going to pay for it. But somehow, because of this process, we owned that car within about 2 months. I mean, it wasn't like a skyhook dropped it on our driveway. So I grew up with these lessons that, if you want something, just visualize it, and there it is. And as I said, visualization was a misnomer for us because we'd use our entire body. We would feel how we would imagine it to feel. We would smell it, we would taste it, use our whole senses. And we would do this as a family together, and miracles happen. My parents tell me the story that they were married 7 years and couldn't conceive a child, so they went to the local religious science church and put in a prayer request to conceive, and I was conceived within a month later. So I was born in this sense that prayers and thoughts and visualizations created me, and your reality. And I don't know any different. What I do remember is the 1960s being made terribly fun of for talking this way. I remember saying the word manifestation at school one day and the kids all rolling their eyes and going, there she goes again. And so I kept it inside. It was something I did only with my closest friends and family. And I remember that if I wanted something, like when I was a teenager, I wanted to quit smoking. I'd taken up smoking to be cool and fit in, and then I got hooked. And I remember my mom and I praying over it, and I completely lost the desire to smoke and having experiences like that. We have always used affirmative prayers. There's two types of prayers. One is supplication, where you beg for something. And one is affirmative, which means you thank God in the present tense for what you're asking for that seems to be in the future. So, thank you, God, that I have a wonderful soulmate relationship. Thank you, God, that I have this perfect health. My husband and I recently used this prayer to manifest a wonderful home. And our prayer was, thank you, God, for this beautiful home that we love so much and easily afford. And boy, we sure got that house easily. Unfortunately, my first marriage was very difficult. I was married to a man who decided to control me by telling me how awful I was. And I believed him for a long time. And my self-esteem just plummeted when I was a young mother. And I didn't really think very highly of myself. I had no confidence, and I didn't think that I could do anything in the world except for be a wonderful mother to my two sons, which I think is an important purpose. But there was something more. I knew that there was something else I was supposed to do, and so I would pray all the time, tell me my life purpose. And every time I would pray that, I would get visions of myself on television and on stages teaching people. And to me, that seemed like science fiction, because what could I, this person who didn't have any confidence, possibly teach anyone? And yet I kept getting these visions to go give speeches, and I didn't know how to do it. What I later learned is that we don't have to worry about how to put our visions or our dreams into reality. All we have to do is follow the guidance that we get one step at a time. So what happened was, one day I was eating ice cream and thinking I was happy, but I got this moment of truth that, my gosh, I'm not happy. I'm in a self-made hell, a prison of my own making, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So I remember getting very humble and getting down on my knees and saying to God, I don't know what to do. You keep showing me these visions that I'm supposed to be a speaker. I don't think I'm qualified. I don't know how to make that happen, but if you'll show me how, I'll follow it. And that was all it took, because right away I got clear signals of what action steps to take. And it was me surrendering that desire to control everything or predict how my dreams would come about. Once I surrendered, then I was told very clearly, go to college. And I thought, how am I going to go to college? I have no money. I have these two little boys. I don't have time or money. And so what I heard very clearly is, go call the guidance counselor. They'll help you. So I called the local college guidance counselor, went in there not knowing how I was going to go to college, but that I was supposed to, and then I just promised God that I would follow whatever I was told to do. And they helped me to get some student loans. And so the student loans allowed me to get child care and go to school, and I went to school very part-time in the beginning, but eventually I was able to get my associate's degree in psychology, which allowed me to get a job as a counselor at a local alcohol and drug counseling center. And then what my next assignment was to start writing books. Well, I thought this was enough just to go to college, but the assignments kept coming one step at a time. And for some reason, I got it in my head that I was going to be published by Bantam. And so I went around the house and I cut out all the little Bantam roosters out of my old paperback Bantam books and put them all around the house, and I started visualizing my name on the spine of a book with a little Bantam rooster. And my third book was published by Bantam, and just like my visualization, I first saw the book at a bookstore. There it was, name on the spine, little Bantam rooster. And so things like that have happened my entire life. It's not enough just to ask. It's not enough just to have positive thoughts. You've got to follow the guidance you get as a result. Sometimes people tell me that they feel like their prayers are being ignored. or that they're just spinning their wheels in mud. Always these are the folks who are ignoring seemingly inconsequential little bits of inner guidance that are asking them to do something. And because the universe gives us little baby steps, one step at a time, it's often unrecognized when you're told to go read a book, take a class, call someone, write a letter. But if we do step A, then we're given the next set of instructions, step B. Then we're given the next set of instructions, step C, and it takes us step by step to where we're going. There are some people that I've met who unfortunately seem to romanticize pain, or even worse, think that it's God's doing, God's will to have pain. And that's just not my belief. My belief is that God's will for us is to have health, prosperity, abundance, love, harmony. And yes, there are challenges in life that we all go through, and there's no shame with that, but it's what you do with the challenges that counts. And we can always find some blessings, some lessons in every challenge, but please, let's not wallow in them or accept them as our lot in life. Let's learn from them, grow, and move on. And what I do is I've always written books about them, hoping that I can help someone else out of whatever quagmire I just got through. And so my challenge has been in some relationships where I've been forced to say goodbye to a couple of really dear friends who just couldn't seem to get out of that victim mentality. And I couldn't, unfortunately, stay there with them. I still love them, but I just couldn't sit there and listen to problems day after day after day, because it affects you to be around folks who want to go on and on about how they're victims. I found that I would come home from lunches with them or getting off the phone with them, and I would feel depressed, and I would feel guilty, and I would feel heavy, and then I would start to attract those things. So unfortunately, we just can't afford to hang out with folks who are in that space a lot. If we do, we have to almost go in there with a shield and really stay strong, and hopefully we can lift them up. But if we can't, unfortunately, sometimes on the spiritual path, you part ways. Well, I remember when I was single, I was a divorcee, and I was traveling around giving workshops, and I started to feel very sorry for myself. And I was looking around at couples that were happy and kissing, going, oh, how come God loves them more? How come I can't have a soulmate? And then I caught myself affirming in the negative like that. Why can't I have love? Why don't I have love? I'm feeling jealous of other people. And once I caught it, I realized what I was doing, because I was making a prayer to not have a soulmate by affirming that I didn't, or by being jealous of others. So that's when I got really clear that, hey, wait a minute, I deserve a soulmate. When you get that clarity and that anger on behalf of yourself, the universe just moves quickly on your behalf. And it's not that they're afraid of your anger, it's because you got clear. When I was wishy-washy about wanting a soulmate, I got wishy-washy results. I got, well, here's a guy that's sort of okay, and maybe this guy can piece these two men together and have my soulmate. This guy writes poetry and this guy has a good job, so put them together, I got a soulmate. But when I got clear, right away it happened. And it's not like my doorbell rang and in walked Stephen. It was guidance. This is how it's worked for me. Every time I've visualized or affirmed, I get this inner roadmap given to me in the form of gut feelings that are repetitive, that urge me to take action, or visions. In this case, I got all of that plus signs that told me to go to yoga class. And the signs were in the form of people, without me asking, giving me DVDs and pamphlets about yoga. And I had never wanted to go to yoga. I wasn't talking about yoga, but all of a sudden everybody that I knew was handing me pamphlets for yoga classes. I didn't put two and two together that this is how the universe was going to deliver my soulmate. But what I did see was that the universe wanted me to go to yoga. So I went to yoga, and I have to admit, I was kicking and screaming in the beginning. I thought, what do you wear? What do you do? I'm going to feel out of place. And I went there, and the second class, I looked over, and there's this cute guy with these blazing blue eyes next to me. My heart went boom. And I went, okay, maybe this is why I'm at yoga class. And a little over a year later, we started dating. And on the second date, we did that talk, where'd you grow up, where'd you go to school? And I was floored, and so was he, when we found out we were next door neighbors. When we were kids, he was our paper boy that I'd had a huge crush on when I was a little girl. And we hadn't recognized each other, but I'd fallen in love with the same guy twice. He is clearly my soulmate. I got what I was looking for. But this is what I tell people who are looking for their soulmate or anything that they're manifesting. It's not enough just to ask. It's not enough just to have positive thoughts. You've got to follow the guidance you get as a result. True guidance is always filled with this sense, this aura and feeling of warmth and love. Now, you might feel intimidated by what you're being asked to do, and it might feel intimidating, but false guidance has this sneaky, getting away from it, edgy feel to it. So you want to watch out for that. If you hear guidance, it's always in the second person voicing. So it always says, go exercise outside, quit drinking, go read this book. Where false guidance has that I, me, egotistical sense to the sentences. You know, where it's talking to you about, I might fail. What if I can't do this? What if people laugh at me? The old energy of this planet is leaving, thank goodness. And the old energy is competition and greed. This belief that I've got to get mine before they get theirs. And the new energy that we're coming into is manifestation and cooperation. And the more of us that learn how to manifest, we're all going to bring peace to Earth, one person at a time that way. The vision that the angels show me of the future is just beautiful. They show me that we will stop going to jobs that don't matter. We'll stop making meaningless objects that we spend money on because we feel empty inside. And we're going to be following our personal passions. And there'll be self-employment or cooperative employment where you're working together on a collective passion. There'll be more meaning in all of our lives. And the way that we do that is by trusting our inner guidance, that you can be fully supported by the universe by following your dreams and your passions and your inner guidance.